Imagine walking into a courtroom where silence suddenly takes over. All eyes turn, not to a lawyer, not to a seasoned attorney, but to a child barely 8 years old, clutching a battered notebook as if it held the weight of the world. What he said next would leave even the judge speechless. But before we reveal what happened inside that tense courtroom, let's step back and see how an ordinary mother and her son were pushed to the edge. Maria Carter wasn't the type of woman who wanted attention. She lived a quiet life in Pensacola, Florida. She worked long overnight shifts as a certified nursing assistant, came home tired but determined, and spent every spare moment trying to make sure her son, Ethan, never felt the weight of her struggles. Ethan was her world. He was small for his age, bright-eyed, with a quiet focus that made teachers say he was mature. But he wasn't mature. He simply carried more than any child should. Their home was a 2-bedroom apartment on West Lake Street. It wasn't perfect, but Maria was proud of it. Neutral carpet, an old refrigerator that hummed too loud, a bathroom with peeling paint, but it was theirs. Maria decorated it with dollar store curtains and thrifted frames. Ethan had a bookshelf lined with secondhand novels and worn encyclopedias. She never had much, but she made sure her son had pencils, paper, and books. That fragile piece began to crack. One winter morning when a pipe burst under the kitchen sink. Water gushed across the linoleum. Maria called the landlord, Gregory Donovan, immediately. He sent maintenance a week later, who glanced at it and promised to return. They never did. Over the next months, little issues piled up into disasters. The bathroom ceiling leaked when it rained. Black mold began creeping behind the cabinets. The window in Ethan's bedroom wouldn't shut properly, leaving the cold air whistling in. Ethan began coughing at night. Maria emailed, called, even wrote letters. Donovan ignored them. Once, when she finally reached him, he sighed and said, "You're being too difficult. Maybe this isn't the right place for you anymore." Maria froze when she heard those words. It was a threat, though he spoke it casually. By spring, the apartment wasn't just breaking, it was turning against them. The mold spread. The bathroom smelled damp. Maria tried scrubbing it with vinegar and baking soda, but it kept returning. One night, the toilet flooded, soaking the floor. Maria waited hours for help. When someone finally came, they left after 10 minutes, saying they'd come back later. Ethan noticed everything. At night, when Maria thought he was asleep, he could hear her at the kitchen table, typing emails on her cracked phone, shuffling papers, muttering to herself. He watched her shoulders slump as she rubbed her temples, exhausted. Then came the day everything changed. Maria came home from her overnight shift, sun blazing, sweat under her scrubs. She reached her apartment door and froze. A paper was taped there. Eviction notice. Her keys slipped from her fingers. She tore the paper from the door, scanned the legal words, and sank onto the steps. No mention of her complaints. Just tenant-caused damage. Her chest tightened. That evening, Ethan found her staring at the notice. "Mom," he whispered, "are we moving?" Maria forced a smile. "No, baby. We'll be fine." He studied her face. "You're lying." She turned away so he wouldn't see her tears. Maria did everything she could. She called legal aid. She filled out forms. Weeks passed. Finally, a public defender was assigned, a young man named Brian Porter. His voice on the phone was clipped, distracted. "Just bring what you have. If I can't make it, tell the judge you're waiting on counsel. They'll understand." Maria hung up with dread. She began preparing everything, photos, emails, logs of every ignored complaint. She even kept swabs of the black mold in small bags labeled with dates. She wasn't a fighter by nature, but this was her home. What she didn't know was that Ethan was preparing too. At night, under the covers with a flashlight, Ethan copied notes into a worn legal pad. Words he barely understood at first. Statute, tenant rights, 7-day notice. He practiced saying them out loud, whispering into the dark. During the day, when Maria thought he was doing homework, he watched hours of YouTube videos about eviction laws, court procedures, and housing rights. He printed passages from old library books, scribbling them into his notebooks. He wasn't playing lawyer. He was training himself, just in case. One evening, Maria woke to find Ethan at the table with her folder of evidence. He had color-coded the photos with sticky notes, arranged documents in order. "What are you doing?" she asked. He looked up calmly. "Making sure you're ready." She smiled weakly. That's not your job, baby. He shrugged. Then call me junior attorney. The morning of court arrived. Maria wore her best navy blouse and flats. Ethan wore his school uniform, khakis and a white polo. His shoes were polished, his hair brushed, but hidden in his backpack was the battered legal pad filled with his notes. They took the bus downtown. The courthouse smelled of floor cleaner and nerves. Families clutched folders, some crying, some silent. Inside courtroom 2B, cases moved fast. One after another, names called, decisions handed down. Some tenants broke down in tears. Others shouted. Lawyers whispered deals in the hallway. Maria's heart pounded when the clerk called, Carter versus Donovan. She stood, Ethan beside her. Judge Helen Ramirez looked up. Representation for the defendant? Silence. Maria opened her mouth. Nothing came. Her throat closed. The judge frowned. No attorney? And in that heavy silence, Maria felt the walls closing in. She thought, this is it. I've lost. I've failed him. But Ethan shifted beside her. He tightened the straps of his backpack, lifted his chin, and did something no one in that courtroom expected. He stood. Excuse me, he said, his voice calm, steady. The room froze. Reporters paused their pens. The landlord's attorney smirked. The bailiff leaned forward. Ethan pulled out his worn legal pad, pages creased from nights of study. I'd like to speak for my mom. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. The judge's eyes widened. Young man, this isn't... But Ethan didn't back down. She didn't do anything wrong. I've read everything. I know what's going on. The judge hesitated. Lawyers scoffed. The gallery whispered. And then, in a voice too steady for his age, Ethan added, We have proof. The judge leaned back slowly, studying him. After a long silence, she sighed. Approach the bench. Just you. Ethan walked forward, sneakers squeaking on the tile. He looked up at the judge, unflinching. She asked if he understood this wasn't a game, if he knew this was about his mother's home. He answered calmly, Yes, ma'am. Then he opened his legal pad. On March 12th, he began, my mom reported mold. She sent photos. She emailed. Nothing was fixed. 2 weeks later, we got a notice saying we were being evicted for damage. But we didn't cause the damage. It was already there. He flipped the page. Florida statute 8356 says, a landlord has to give 7 days notice to fix a problem. We didn't get a warning. We got a threat. The courtroom leaned in. Reporters scribbled. Even the landlord's lawyer stopped smirking. Ethan paused, looked the judge in the eye, and asked, Am I allowed to object if they say something that isn't true? The gallery gasped. A paralegal whispered, Oh my God. Judge Ramirez's lips twitched into almost a smile. She nodded softly. You may continue. And just like that, in a courtroom filled with lawyers and silence, an 8-year-old boy became his mother's defender.